new concepts, and something I spoke about was the legal subject and how the legal subject is the bearer of rights, duties, and responsibilities, and the two types of legal subjects we have in South African law. And I made reference to the natural person as well as the juristic person. Okay, these are the two legal subjects in South African law. So I will tell you which page in the study guide to go to now, and then we can continue our discussion. I am on page, I'm going to, okay, I'm going to skip all of this and we will go, just give me a second. I'm on page 15. All of us go to page 15, please. And there is just a recap of what we did last week. Paragraph 2.2 gives us a definition of the law of persons. Paragraph 2.3 tells us the two types of legal subjects that we have in South African law, and I gave you a few examples where we speak of associations incorporated in terms of general enabling legislation, such as banks. We speak of associations especially created and recognized as juristic persons in terms of separate legislations, such as UNISA. And then associations which comply with common law requirements. And here we have an NPO, which we refer to as a non-profit organization. And an example here is the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, which is the SPCA. So now I want us to quickly look at page page 21. And here we are going to start with the nitty-gritty today, and we're going to start with firstly the beginning of legal personality. Those of you who have textbooks, you can turn to page 7 of your textbook. So I need the following to happen, if it's possible. If it's possible, those of you who pose questions to me outside of the chat function, if you pose a question to me, I would like you to then either raise your hand. Once I see your hand is raised, or you either interrupt me, I want you to unmute your mic and, if possible, turn on your camera so I can see who I'm engaging with. At this point, we all are getting used to the Teams function, but I'm still used to the classroom setup where I see my students face to face. So I'd like, if possible, I'd like some of that as well. So I'd like to see your faces when we engage with each other. So I'm going to look at paragraph 3.2, where we look at now the beginning of legal personality. Now, legal personality, students, very, very important. I hope you have a notepad and a pen in front of you where you are taking down some notes in terms of what I'm saying. Those of you who are not taking notes, the session is recorded, so you will be in a position to go back to this discussion. But the important aspect of legal personality is when a legal subject, that is a natural person, me or you, okay? So this is the point where a legal subject, whether it's a natural person or a juristic person. This happens at incorporation for a juristic person, but my discussion now will focus on a natural person. Legal personality is that point in the law where the legal person is regarded as having attained certain rights. So, in South African law, very, very importantly, and make a note of this, the general rule, okay? The general rule relating to legal personality in South African law is that a natural person attains legal personality at birth. Okay? So, very, very importantly, you are not regarded as a legal subject before you are born alive. So, birth in South African law has a certain requirement, okay? And that requirement, students, is that in order for you to attain legal personality, you as a legal subject must be born alive. Okay? So live birth is a requirement. If there is a stillbirth or the fetus, now remember, very, very importantly, another term. Here I am making reference to the fetus. That is the unborn child still in the mother's womb. If that fetus is not born alive, a fetus can be born. Okay? So there's a difference between stillbirth and being born alive. So in order for this requirement to be met, okay, this requirement of being regarded as a legal subject in South African law, in order for this requirement to be met, the unborn child must be born alive. Okay? The unborn child, the fetus, sorry, must be born alive. So I'm going to pause there for a minute or so, and I will entertain two questions on birth. Okay? So if there's any confusion around birth and the attainment of legal personality, ask them now. Either put it in the chat function or raise your hands. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions. So if there's no questions, I'm going to continue. No questions.
Mr. Clenance, something wrong with my screen here, but I'm trying to raise my hand, but it's not working. It's not showing on your side.
It's fine. Who am I speaking to?
Terence.
Okay, Terence, what's your question?
The question is, if when you talk about if the baby's or the fetus is born and it survives for 2 minutes or 5 minutes and then dies, does it have legal status at that point?
It meets the requirement of legal subjectivity, yes. So even if
okay.
it breathes, but one of the requirements, and this is part of the requirements in the textbook, okay? There's still a debate about it, okay? But there must be separation so that umbilical cord must have been cut. There must be separation from the mother as well. So breath, the baby, once born alive, you see it changes from the fetus to the child. Okay, so once it comes out of the mother's womb, we regard it as the child, but it needs to meet at least two requirements. And those requirements is the child must breathe independently, okay, as well as being separated from the mother. Okay, so go through those two requirements in terms of the requirements of birth. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Terence, or any other questions from other participants? Okay. So if there's no other questions, let's continue. Now, in terms of the procedural requirements, there must be registration of birth, and the procedure is explained on page 8, page Eaton, the law of persons, pages 8 to 12. So that you can go through on your own. Okay. Now let's go to the following, where we speak of the interest of the unborn child. Now, here I need you to be very, very clear on terminology. Okay? So, when I refer to the interest of the unborn child, the single Latin term I refer to is the nasciturus. Students, so when I refer to the interest of an unborn child, I refer to the nasciturus. And let me give you two examples of the interest of an unborn child in our law. And we are going to familiarize yourself with these terms extensively. Why? Because for exam and assignment purposes, you are going to be given problem questions on these issues. So the interest of the unborn child, or the Latin term the nasciturus arises in our law when we speak of succession and when we speak of an action for loss of support. Okay? We will also deal with an issue relating to prenatal injury, and you are going to be expected to know what happened in santam versus pension. Okay, the santam versus pension case. Now I'm going to take a step back. Okay, who can explain to me in simple English? Okay, because the simpler I make it, it's better for you to understand the concept. Who can explain to me how a situation arises where an unborn child is entitled to certain interest? How does it arise? Okay, you can either raise your hands or just unmute your mics and start speaking. I will give an opportunity for 3 comments. I want 3 comments.
Uh, Advocate Kleinans.
Yeah.
It's Terence here.
Okay,
I'll give an example. I think is that when a mother has a child, and she has some children alive, and also a child that she's pregnant with, and she wants to write them into her will, and when she just before the at birth, put it that way, the mother dies, but the child is actually born, and the the mother dies, and the child is born. So, does the actually the unborn child that when the will was made out, does that
Terence, I'm
child
going to stop you there.
inherit
Terence,
the yeah?
Terence, let me stop you there because there's a bit of a contradiction. Okay? Because once the child is born, okay, alive, the
Right.
child attains legal subjectivity. The child becomes a legal subject, attains legal
Okay.
personality, meaning the interest falls away. Okay?
Right.
Because once the child born alive attains rights, duties, and responsibilities, those rights and interests are conferred upon the child. So, here, in terms of the nasciturus, we're not even considering birth yet. Okay?
Okay.
So, that unborn child is still regarded as a fetus. And what I want all of you to have clarity on now is, in South African law, that fetus does not have any rights. So in terms of the general rule, okay, the general rule is legal subjectivity is only attained at birth. Okay, that is what all of you need to be clear on. So prior to birth, there are no rights. Why? Because the fetus does not meet the requirements. There has been no birth. So because there has been no birth, because there has been no breathing, because there has been no separation in terms of the umbilical cord, there cannot be rights. That is a general rule. But one exception, Okay. One exception to that general rule, students, is the interest of an unborn child, hence the nascituras. Okay. So, are all of us clear on that? Terence, you need to be very clear on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I
So
just
you can't
clarify?
tell
Yeah.
me, wait, I'm going to stop you still there. You
Okay.
can't tell me that the mother has now put the unborn child as a beneficiary in the will. And then the mother dies at birth, but the child is born. Okay. So
Yes.
that example cannot happen. Okay. You must give me an example where the mother is still pregnant with the child. Okay. There has been no birth, but that fetus now attains some kind of interest in law. Your
Okay.
discussion needs to be around that point.
Okay.
Remember, no birth yet.
Okay. So if the father the father says, okay, I've got 3 daughters, and I want to leave my inheritance for my daughters. One of the daughters is pregnant. Um, the father dies before the child is born, um, and and so the inheritance gets split between the daughters. Does the inheritance split between the daughters and the one daughter's child, or does that unborn child still inherit?
Did you read Ex parte Budelsteenkamp?
Red Heaton, yes.
Okay. Ex parte Budelsteenkamp. Now, you are referring, okay, Terence, I'm going to do this. I'm going to park your comment and question for about 2 minutes, and I'm going to see whether there are no other comments. Once I have all the comments or discussions, I'm going to respond to it. Okay, is that okay?
That's fine, 100%.
Okay, so Terence, switch off your mic for me so long.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or discussions relating to a benefit that arises or an interest that must be taken into account relating to the nascituras? Any other hands? Hey, I see students, I'm noticing, I don't know whether it's a time thing or a weather thing, but all of you are silent. So it tells me two things: that you are either unprepared for this morning's session, or you are still tired and sitting in bed and just listening to the discussion. Which one is it? Okay, I want students to partake in this discussion. So I'm going to respond to the comment of Terence quickly. Okay. So students, I want you to understand and appreciate the following. The nascituras, or the unborn child, sometimes there is a situation, okay, which arises prior to birth. And this situation arises where there is a direct benefit to the unborn child. Now, in terms of the law, this means a right is conferred onto that unborn child. But what does our law say? Our law states that because that fetus or that unborn child in South African law cannot have rights. Okay? Remember, a legal subject is that subject in a law regarded as being the bearer. Very, very importantly, you are the bearer or holder of rights. So once that fetus is still in the womb, okay, that fetus cannot be the bearer of rights. Okay? Are all of us clear, firstly, on that point? If we are clear on that point, either raise your hands or put a yes in the chat function. Are all of us clear on that point? So once still in the womb, that fetus cannot be a bearer or a holder of rights. Okay? And I'm getting an indication via the chat function that all of us are clear on that point. Now, that point which I'm referring to, okay, Alzette gave me a yes, Waleem gave me a yes, Terence gave me a yes, Perez gave me a yes, and Bianca gave me a yes. Now, that point in our law relating to the fetus, okay, what point do we refer that to in our law? That point is regarded as the I'm typing it into the chat function. That point is regarded as the general rule. So the general rule regarding the rights of the fetus or regarding the rights of the unborn child is that that fetus or that unborn child cannot be the bearer or the holder of rights. Okay? But now our law provides for an exception. Okay? And the exception is now referred to as the nascituras. Okay? So when we refer to the nascituras, it means that unborn child, okay, which is not a bearer of rights, is now entitled to an interest or a benefit. Okay? And there are certain situations where an interest or a benefit accrues or it arises. And one example in our law is the law of succession. That unborn child can now be a beneficiary in terms of the law of testate or intestate succession. And here an example was made in the law of testate succession. Testate succession is where the testator leaves a valid will. And yeah, I want you to familiarize yourself or go read the judgment and the case of ex parte Boedelsteenkamp. And in terms of the law of succession or intestate succession, the unborn child now becomes a beneficiary in a will or a beneficiary in terms of intestate succession. Okay? So the child, unborn child or the nasciturus stands to inherit something. So when the unborn child, in terms of the law of succession, stands to inherit a benefit, okay, we now start speaking of the exception to the general rule, and we now make a reference to the nasciturus. Is it starting to become clear now? Another, Terence, your mic is on.
Um, Advocate Kleinhans, to me, that sounds, I know that's the law, but to me, that sounds very contradictory in that, on the one hand, you're not giving the fetus any legal status, but on the other hand, you are, because you're giving him or her rights when they're not born. So there's a contradiction, isn't there, in that situation?
Owen, are you there? Have we lost you?
Adele, I'm here.
So okay. I was lost there for a moment. Sorry.
Okay. Terence. Okay, I'm going to start over.
Sorry.
So, yeah. Terence, your question is a very good question because you're telling me that the law actually has double standards.
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of those double standards, the fetus doesn't have rights, but once there is a benefit, now the fetus suddenly has rights, which makes some kind of sense, Terence, but it will make more sense to you once I explain the operation of the nasciturus fiction. Okay?
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm giving you another term. You have the one term called the nasciturus, which speaks of the interest of the unborn child. Then we're going to deal later in the session or in our next session with the nasciturus fiction. Okay? But now I want to answer your question in terms of an example. You're telling me that there's a contradiction in the law. So for homework, I want all of you to go and download and familiarize yourself with the Termination of Pregnancies, the Termination of Pregnancies Act. I don't have the full citation of that piece of legislation now. But here we have a situation, and here we have a situation where legislation provides that a woman has choices regarding the reproductive aspects of her body. So this piece of legislation allows that a woman in a certain time period after falling pregnant is able to terminate a pregnancy without the permission or consent of anyone else. So this is regarded as a unilateral choice, where the woman can simply make a choice, I now want to terminate this pregnancy. Okay? So Terence, if the fetus have been, if the fetus in South African law, okay, and I'm talking in terms of the general application of law, if this fetus was afforded any rights, okay, a woman could not easily make this choice in terms of termination of pregnancy. Okay?
Would that be called murder then?
No, it can't be called murder because the fetus has no rights.
But if
And the
yeah, if it
fetus
yeah,
is
if they
not
did give it
regarded,
rights, if they
if
did give it rights, if it did
it
say
would
the
have
fetus
been
does, that would
illegal.
be murder, right?
Yes, it would have been regarded as illegal.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
So the fetus in South African law does not have rights. There are, however, you must be mindful that there are, however, other opinions. And yeah, the Boni Morris comes into place because now we're looking at religious views as well. Okay? So in
Yeah.
terms of other views, there are other voices that regard the fetus as being human and as having rights. Hence, we have a movement that is anti-termination of pregnancy. And also, if we look at our Boni Mores in terms of our religious convictions, okay, some religions, and here I'm making an example now. Terence, just switch off your mic.
Sorry.
And here I'm making an example now in terms of the Catholic religion as well as Islam, where termination of pregnancy is regarded as against the religious convictions. Okay? So there is a movement that is against termination of pregnancy. But South African law provides for a woman to have this choice. Okay? Hence, yeah, I'm only making one example where because freedom of reproductive choices now trumps the right of the fetus, meaning the fetus is not regarded as the holder of rights, duties, and responsibilities. But our law makes certain exceptions. Okay? And the exception only arises, students, very, very importantly. This exception only arises when there is a benefit or an advantage. Okay? So only where there's a benefit or an advantage. Terence, does this to an extent answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I just want one other comment. Go back to the Termination of Pregnancy Act. When you say there are exceptions under this rule that when there's benefit to the child, I would say, this is just my opinion, that in terms of the Termination of Pregnancy Act, the right to terminate the pregnancy also clashes with the right of the child to have a life. So the
No.
benefit of that child is to live a life, right? So, so if the same rule was applied, which is this one is for the benefit of the child, which is generally, in both circumstances, you would have a clash in terms of the termination of pregnancy bill, because the child benefits in both situations.
Terence, let me stop you there again. Okay. You may switch off your mic. So, Terence, what I'm gathering from your comment, okay, remember, we live in an open and free society, meaning everyone is entitled to their views, okay? So you are entitled to your views, but you need to be clear on one thing. You cannot, in South African law, okay, or you cannot, as a South African legal scholar or a South African legal practitioner, in the same sentence, refer to a fetus, okay, the unborn child, or a fetus and a child being alive in the same sentence, okay? Because the fetus in South African law is regarded as having no rights. The fetus cannot be the bearer of rights. And birth, okay, to look at the fetus and conferring rights over the fetus in terms of a woman's reproductive choices, there cannot be a choice between that. Okay? Because if you want to give rights to the fetus in terms of the law, and having those rights challenge the choice of a woman to terminate a pregnancy, the woman's rights to terminate a pregnancy will always trump. Okay? And it will always trump because the fetus is regarded in South African law as not having rights. It cannot be a holder or a bearer of rights. And I first need you to have clarity on that concept. Okay? So in the same sentence, you cannot use the fetus and refer to it as a child. Okay? Once you have clarity on that, then, okay, then I can say, now I can have sight of your views. But I need you to firstly to understand the law. And good law in South Africa this is good law. Okay? It's a primary source of law. Good law dictates in South African law that a fetus does not have rights. Okay, do we all have clarity on that?
Got that. Thanks very much.
Okay. Any other views or comments, Terence?
No, I'm happy now. Thank you very much.
Okay. So we cannot. Okay. Now, this is, Terence, I want to make an example of you. And this is a classic example where our moral convictions, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, okay? This is a classic example where our moral convictions clashes with good law. Okay? That is why we have a situation where certain lawyers will say, okay, in terms of my moral views, I cannot defend a rape or a murder accused. Or in terms of my moral views, I cannot have a pedophile as a client. Okay? Because here we have a situation where your moral convictions clashes with good law. Does that make sense, Terence?
Yes, no, it does make sense. I
Okay.
think that would probably lead to other other things like discrimination and things. So, but we'll leave it as that. I think.
Yes. Okay. So as long as Terence and the rest of you have clarity on the law when it comes to the fetus, okay? And the viewpoint or good law in South Africa is that the fetus cannot be afforded any rights, okay? But the law does make certain exceptions. And the exceptions to the law is what is important and what we are going to discuss. So you either raise your hand or tell me, yes, you have clarity on the law. Can I continue? Okay, so now the situation arises, and now I'm going back to the Nascaturas. Now I've explained that a benefit could possibly arise where the fetus or the unborn child now becomes a beneficiary in terms of the law of succession, or a situation arises where the breadwinner in the family is negligently taken away. Okay? And here I have a situation where the father of the fetus negligently dies. Then we have a situation in law where there is loss of support, meaning a benefit now arises to the unborn child where an action for damages for loss of support can arise. Whose mic is on there? Please switch off that mic. Okay. So I'm going to say it again before the interruption arises. The first example was a benefit in terms of the law of succession. A second example could be an action for loss of support, where the father of the unborn child negligently dies or is negligently incapacitated, where there is a situation of loss of support. Does that make sense, students? Okay, and then this benefit will arise. So, are there any other questions before we can continue? Are there any other questions before we can continue? Because now I want us to continue the discussion relating to the Nascaturus fiction. So if there's no questions, I will then continue. So I want us to look at the following. I'm on page 27 of the study guide, and I want us to go to the heading that speaks of patrimonial interest. But before we go to that, I want us to go to the heading that states the interest taken into account. So I want you to note the following. When I started with the module of Law of Persons, or PVL1501, I indicated to you that many of the legal principles are contained in the common law. Okay, so the interest of the unborn child or the nasciturus is an example of how we're working with common law. Okay, so very, very importantly, I want you to read the section that says, please note that although, and I'm going to speak about what the nasciturus fiction is now. Remember, we've spoken about the nasciturus, and the nasciturus, the meaning of that relates to the interest of the unborn child. But now we're going to add additional terminology to that, and that terminology is the nasciturus fiction. So it tells us that, please note that although the nasciturus fiction had only limited use in the common law, okay, its application in modern South African law has been extended. Our law proceeds from a general principle and protects now any conceivable interest. Okay, so what the situation we're talking about is that any conceivable interest to the nasciturus can now be taken into account. We're not only looking at common law interest, okay? And when I refer to common law interest refers to the right to be a beneficiary in the law. So common law interest relates to the law of succession, okay? And when we speak of santam versus pension, okay, it's now these interests are extended to patrimonial interest as well, okay? So I want us to now have a short discussion on what the nasciturus fiction entails. Okay? A short discussion on what the nasciturus fiction entails. So before I go over to how the nasciturus fiction operates, I want to just see if there are no hands. Are there any questions before I continue? Okay, there are no other questions. So if there's no other questions, let's continue to the term that speaks of the Nascaturus fiction. Now, students, some English. What does the term fiction mean? I want you to either type your comment into the chat function or unmute your mic and give me an answer. What does the term fiction mean?
It's not real.
Something that is not real. Okay? So, how can, now my question to you is, who is students, how can something that is not real, something fiction, something that is not real, how can something that is not real operate in our law? How does that make sense?
It doesn't.
it, it doesn't. Okay. Good comment from you, Terence. Let me just see what our chat function says. Okay. Bianca says something imaginary, something not real. Good answer, Bianca. And then Alz says something imaginary. So, yes, students, you are correct when you say that when we speak of the Nascaturus fiction, we speak of something not real taking place. So I want you to view it as that. Okay? But now I want us to go to a requirement of a good and effective legal system. And one of the requirements of a good legal system speaks of legal certainty. Okay? The law needs to provide legal certainty. So now I'm going to pose you with a rather complicated or a difficult question. And the question is as follows: how can the law provide for legal certainty, students, when it makes use of fiction? How can the law provide for legal certainty when it makes use of fiction? Can I have a response? Can I have a response? Anyone?
I think they use fiction to actually make a point. Without using fiction, the point won't be made, or the case cannot be made. That's probably as best as I can come up with at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments? Any other comments? Okay. So, why this fiction? And now I'm going to explain to you how this requirement of legal certainty is being met, okay, by applying this fiction. Okay, so firstly, what happens when there is a benefit for the unborn child? Okay, what happens when there is a benefit to the unborn child? Can this unborn child or the nascituras enjoy this benefit, yes or no? Students, question. Can this unborn child or the nascituras enjoy this benefit, yes or no?
No, because it's
What?
it's a fetus, and it says under the general rule it has no legal status.
Your question is correct to a certain extent, Terence. Okay? When you say no, the unborn child cannot enjoy this benefit. Okay? The fetus or the unborn child cannot enjoy this benefit. Why? Because it's not born yet. It's still in the mother's womb. And hence, it cannot enjoy that benefit. Okay? So here we have the situation where the unborn child now is entitled to a benefit. But when can that benefit actually materialize?
When it's born,
When it's born. Very, very good. That benefit can now only materialize once the fetus or the nascituras meets the requirements of birth. And this is where the nascituras fiction now comes into operation. Because this fiction does what now? This fiction now keeps in abeyance. Okay? It keeps in abeyance this benefit. Okay? So this benefit is kept in abeyance until what happens?
and until such time as the child can benefit or physically.
And at what stage is that, Terence? At what stage is that?
Well, when they're
When the child
born,
is born
separate
alive.
from the mother. Yeah, yeah.
Very, very good. Once birth takes place. So, LZ, your comment is correct, where this benefit is actually put on hold or it's kept in abeyance. And it's kept there in abeyance until this fetus is now born. And what happens at birth? What happens at birth?
It becomes a legal subject at birth.
Very, very good. Okay. At birth, legal subjectivity begins, and that child now, remember, now I'm not making a reference to a nascituras or a fetus, but at birth, that child now becomes a bearer of rights. Meaning, once you become a bearer of rights, those rights can now be claimed. Okay? And then It means the Nascaturus fiction has come to full operation. Does that make sense? So the Nascaturus fiction is now technically the vehicle used in law to keep those rights, those benefits that has accrued to the unborn child, that has accrued to the Nascaturus. It keeps those rights or benefits, it keeps those benefits in abeyance until the requirement of birth is completed. Once birth has been completed, it means that legal subject, okay, is now the holder of rights. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Students, does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. It makes sense.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Now, I have a very, very bright spark here, and that bright spark is LZ. Okay. LZ, you answered my next question. Okay. Where you are telling me that the benefits or the fiction, the Nascaturus fiction, will fall away if the child is born dead. Okay, so very, very good, LZ. Students, please take note that these benefits that are kept in abeyance in terms of how the Nascaturus fiction operates. Okay, remember, the Nascaturus fiction can only operate successfully if this unborn child or the fetus meets the requirement of birth. Okay, if this fetus is born dead or it's stillborn, it means those benefits fall away. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so the Nascaturus fiction is the vehicle, okay, that is used to keep all those benefits in abeyance until the child is born alive. And once the child is born alive, the child attains legal subjectivity, meaning it now becomes the holder or bearer of rights, duties, and responsibilities. Okay? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions for me?
Uh, Advocate, I just want to just make a statement and say that's actually a very good part of the law, because you can assign benefits to an unborn child, which is great. I don't know what the other law in other countries is, but that's a good aspect of our law.
And Terence, do you see how the Nascaturus fiction contributes to this requirement of a good legal system where legal certainty is provided?
Yeah, yeah. It actually makes up for the gap, I would say, in the law regarding the fetus in general.
Yes, yes. There I agree with you. Okay. Are there any other comments or other questions? Terence, thanks for the input. And the following people, thanks for your input as well. If I go to the chat function, I've received good input from LZ. I received input from Bianca. Okay. And Perez, you were a bit quiet today. So I'm going to wait on our one-on-one session to find out why you were so quiet. Then I want to conclude our discussion there for today. Adele, are you available to provide input on our public holiday and how we're going to make an alternative?
Yes, Owen. Um,
So I'll switch off my mic and I'll give over to Adele. Thanks, Adele.
okay. On the 26th of September, you would have had a class, but because the 24th, the Thursday, is a public holiday, our experience in general is that students take a long weekend. So you have a choice whether you want to see Owen on that day, because Owen doesn't have a problem to be available on that day. Am I right, Owen? Alternatively,
That's correct, Adele.
Okay. Alternatively, you could have a session with him on the Wednesday evening. That's on the 23rd of September then. So it's your choice now whether you want to go ahead on the Saturday of the 26th or whether you would prefer to rather move your session forward to the Wednesday of the 23rd. Can you either unmute your mic and tell us what your preference would be, or type it in the chat section?
I don't have a problem with the Wednesday night. That should be fine for me.
Okay, and the time then, would you want to do 5 o'clock or 5:30?
I'd say 5 o'clock would be great. 5 o'clock on the 23rd.
Other students? Okay, Alzette, you're okay. So if we do it at 5 o'clock on the Wednesday, would that suit everyone, or are some people still coming home from work? Would 5:30 then be better? Owen, what is your preference in terms of time?
Adele, I'm flexible. So 5 or 5:30 on the Wednesday, or the Saturday, 9 o'clock. I'm now seeing everyone is fine on Wednesday, the 23rd. So 5 or 5:30 suits me fine. I'm flexible. So Adele, in terms of time, I will leave that to you, and then I will be guided by that.
Okay, I think let's safety sake, so that we can include the others. Let's do it 5:30, Owen, if you're okay with that. Okay.
That is fine, Adele. 5:30 works for me.
All right. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to send out an email regarding the change from the 26th to the 23rd at 5:30 to all students. All you need to know is once you've, and I want to give you a tip. What you do is you schedule this PVL as a recipient, a contact on your cell phone or on your laptop. And if you are anywhere and it is on your cell phone and you've saved the link in the email option of your contact on your phone, if you click on that email link, you immediately into the session as well. And do it with all your sessions. You put the session name as a contact on your phone, and you put the link into the email part or field.
Terence, just switch off your mic for me, please.
Oh, sorry.
So that's an easy way not to lose your link or to have quick access if you're running late somewhere and you want to tune in. And then I don't see anybody needing a one-on-one session at this point in time, because we are getting the Teams platform ready for that. But I thought if any of you would like to already start with that on the evenings that Owen doesn't have a class, then I could schedule it even today. So please, at the end of the session, make sure that you have added your student number here, that you have completed the attendance register, and that you have completed the feedback form that I posted at the top of the feed here in the chat function. And then at the end of the session, if you still are considering having a one-on-one session, please let me know in the chat function, and then I can get Owen to be in contact with you. And I'd prefer if you could that you make use of this function so that Owen can contact you. What I'll do in the meantime is I will schedule a session for you on Teams. You will get the invite in your Outlook or in your, yes, it will be in your calendar of your My Life email address. So you have it there then. So I'll book the session formally as if it's a meeting between you and Owen. The same time, and obviously we will confirm the time for you. I will first get Owen's time, schedule it, and you at that time, all you do is you log on again with your PVL link, and Owen will be there with just you. And please don't tell Owen I don't understand page 1 to 100. That doesn't work. Okay, so we tell students you've got a 30-minute session, but obviously to Owen's discretion, it could be a longer session. Okay, so please make use of that. Otherwise, that function will be available throughout the rest of the semester, and there will then be a formal route that you can follow and not me scheduling it for you. It's just while we're waiting for Owen's login to the Teams forum for him to have the functionality without me intervening. Okay, that's from my side. Owen, over to you if you want to conclude.
Adele, thank you for that input. Thank you for all the support you provide to me as well. Thanks to you, Claudine, and the rest of the team. I really feel comfortable with this now, and I hope that the students are also comfortable with this. So students, as Adele said, I'm available for those one-on-one sessions. I want you to have the sessions with me. Adele will facilitate. Also, our session for the 23rd is confirmed. So thank you for this morning. I enjoyed the session. I hope it was valuable to you. And Adele and I will see that on the feedback you provide. Please also don't forget to fill out the register or leave your student numbers in the chat function. Adele and students, thank you so much. I'm logging off now.
Thank you, Owen.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Adele, I have a question if you're ready.
Yes. I'm listening.
Last week, I just mentioned an announcement. So I went back onto the announcements. On the 23rd of July, it was posted by C van der Westhuizen. it actually said that the reader, due to the lockdown and copyrights, it's not possible to send out the readers due to the copyrights and the lockdown, that it is only, the students only need to know the contents as it is prescribed or said in the Heaton or in the textbook, and the students don't need to go into depth as the reader, what the reader is saying. So I just want to have clarity on that today. Must we go into depth with the reader and study that, or shall we abide by what that announcement said on the 23rd of July?
Oh, you know what? Is jy Afrikaans?
Ek is Afrikaans.
Weet jy, die veiligste manier om dit om klarigheid daaroor te kry, is om vir die dosent 'n e-pos te stuur. Ek dink jy het dit al gedoen, het jy nie?
Nee, ek het nog nie.
Okay. Ek dink regtig waar die veiligste. Ek kan nou vir jou sê, dit staan daar, dis geskryf daar. En ek meen, as dit nou nog steeds daar is, dan gaan jy na aanleiding van wat daar is. En weet jy wat sal ek ook doen? Ek sal 'n screenshot maak daarvan en ek sal dit save. So my raad nou is, as dit is wat die boodskap huidiglik nog sê, dit is die tweede semester in Julie, dan kan jy daar volgens gaan. Maar ek sal ook veilig wees en vir die dosent 'n e-pos skryf en vra, is dit daai boodskap nog geldig? As jy nie terugkry nie, dan gaan jy met daai boodskap.
Okay, ja, nee, want ek dink dit gaan impak hê op elke student wat PVL doen. Ja. Vreeslik dankie. Ek sal in dit inkyk. Dankie, Adel.
En as jy 'n antwoord kry van hom, asseblief bring dit klas toe sodat die ander studente ook weet.
Ek sal so maak. Vreeslik dankie.
Goed.
Alright.
Goed. Bye.
Bye.